I'm one of 7 girls, and I always grew up knowing I was a little bit different to my sisters, but I was never quite sure how until I kind of hit the age of 16, where I'd fallen desperately in love with a girl in my school. Sadly, my mother had found out, and she was very much of the opinion that gay people are broken and just need some help to be fixed. So the next thing, I was off to hypnotherapy. I only had about 6 or 7 sessions, but I had a tape that I had to listen to every night. And I don't really remember a lot. Later in life, I've had psychologists who have said that's pretty normal when you've undergone a huge trauma, that you don't actually remember a lot. But what I do remember is I really remember feeling so disassociated and so physically unwell after each session. And in fact, spent most of my year 9 unable to attend school because of how bad it was. Like so many survivors of conversion practices, I've been clinically diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. That took a number of decades to actually come through, because it took me a long time to recognise that the unfounded fear that I have that gay people would harm children, and therefore if I identified as being gay, that I too would harm a child. It took so long for me to recognise that what I'd been told was wrong. I spent over $100,000, not just of my money, but also of government's money, undergoing therapies to help myself. And sadly, there's been 2 occasions in my life where I've got to the point where I thought maybe I'm too broken to be alive. And that's the serious harm that this practice does for people. For start, how can you consent, even as an adult, when you're being told that you're broken and you're wrong? So you're in a position of vulnerability. That's not true consent. But also, consent to what? You don't have an illness. This isn't a therapy. It doesn't fix anything. It's not medically endorsed or done. It's by somebody who's not a trained medical or psychological person. It's nonsense. You can't consent to something that doesn't work and in fact is harmful. You can't consent to harm. Even in my own situation, it's meant that I've always felt like I'm never quite good enough. So that spills over into my relationships with loved ones, with my family, with my own child. Also, it spills over into my employment, because if you don't feel like you're good enough because you're broken, then you don't necessarily achieve what you want. And sadly, there are families that are without loved ones because someone from conversion who's survived conversion therapy has decided to unalive themselves. The cost to society is huge. Also, the cost to society is this. Why do we tell people that they're broken when in fact they're not? Well, here's the sad thing that people have to realise. You don't ever have an absolute right to anything, whether you're a parent or a religious leader or an individual. All of our rights do not imbalance against somebody's right not to be harmed. I'm a mother. You have every right as a parent to say to your child what you believe is right or wrong, but you don't have a right to inflict harm. In fact, the law prevents it. This is all this bill is going to do. It's just further say this is a form of harm that you cannot do, and that is taking your child or seeking conversion practices to fix your child when there's nothing wrong with your child. Ministers are still going to be able to stand at the pulpit and say what they believe. Christians will still be able to believe what they believe. All this legislation is to do is to stop this harmful practice from occurring. That's all. It's really urgent. Tasmania was the last place to decriminalise homosexuality. We don't want to end up being a haven for these practices and this harm to continue. People who don't think the harm is happening today, they're really wrong. We've even had people in the media speak out to say, yes, I'm going to continue to do this practice. So we know these practices are going on. We don't want Tasmania to be a place where people come in order to be harmed. That is not the kind of Tasmania we want. There are a few of us that have chosen to speak out as conversion survivors. We had practices happen to us some time ago. And the reason why we've had to wait this long is we've had to wait this long to be well enough to actually be able to speak to you about what happened to us. I don't want anybody else to have to go through what we've been through. It's not right. It's not fair. And it's harmful. Young people are our future. They need to know that they are safe in their homes, in their schools, and in their communities. And they cannot have harm inflicted upon them simply because somebody believes something different to somebody else. A belief does not give you a right to cause harm.